So someone might say, well, yeah, but that's assuming God exists and wanted to raise Jesus. Okay, so I think we can give some evidence for that, some good evidence for God's existence, and some evidence that he would have wanted to raise Jesus. But let's just suppose you throw all that out, okay? Then we just say, well, then the probability of the resurrection as a supernatural event would be inscrutable. We wouldn't say it's improbable. You would just say it's inscrutable. Now, if you start off with the a priori assumption that God does not exist, well, then of course you're going to say the resurrection is improbable by supernatural causes, because such causes don't exist, right?
You don't have to start off with God does not exist. You could start off with we don't know if a God exists or not. That is a much softer position and much more reasonable given the evidence that we have. Supernatural causes have yet to be proven to actually happen regardless of whether or not a God exists. In fact, the very existence of supernatural causes would mean that we couldn't do science at all. Also, I wouldn't say inscrutable, because that means it's unable to be understood. That kind of assumes that it actually did happen. It's just that now you can't understand it because the supernatural doesn't exist. We are able to explain it without the supernatural existing, so it's definitely not inscrutable, although it's very improbable that it happened. At the end of the section, he admits that his position is improbable unless the supernatural exists. So his entire argument rests on the unproven claim that the supernatural does exist.
So this is where worldview comes in. And a lot of people are going to reject the arguments that God does not exist. So that would be just one way of answering that particular Humean argument.
That's right.
Of course, he puts forth others, and we'd answer those differently.
Yeah, no, I think that you said it well, because that kind of assumes that there is so in other words, if it's possible that God exists, then it's possible that miracles happen, right? But if you just assume that it's not possible that God exists, then of course you can't. I mean, you'll have to again come up with a criteria on what you would qualify to be a miracle. And whenever you press people on this, they tend to just kind of, well, I don't know what it would take.
Not all atheists out there would say that it's not possible that God exists. Agnostic atheists would definitely say that it's possible that a God or gods do exist. So it comes off like you're strawmanning the entire argument by stating that all atheists are Gnostic atheists or hard atheists. Those would be atheists that say that God definitely does not exist and it's not possible for him to exist. Also, possible does not mean probable. While it's possible for a deity to exist, it's not probable given the evidence that Jesus was resurrected from the dead by your specific definition of God. Finally, to qualify as a miracle, you would have to show a complete suspension of the natural order of reality. Now, that's a pretty tall order, considering that everything that happens in this reality is subject to the natural order of this reality. So don't act like we can't explain what we would need in order to classify something as a supernatural event. I mean, you just can't substantiate that they actually happen.
Jerry W. says, I think the most reasonable dispute of the resurrection is the stolen body theory. Can you guys help me reason this?
Yep. Yeah, for the stolen body theory, okay, so there's one of two things here. Either the disciples stole the body or someone else stole the body.
Both of these explanations are natural explanations and are automatically way more likely than a magical Jew resurrection. Now, I don't think that the stolen body hypothesis really pans out. I mean, considering that if there really was an empty tomb and the body really was stolen, the Romans would have definitely went around killing anybody associated with Jesus at the time. We don't have any evidence to suggest that that happened in history, so there's really no reason to think that it did.
One thing that scholars are virtually unanimous on, okay, nearly unanimous at 100%, is that the disciples had experiences shortly after Jesus' death that they interpreted as appearances of the risen Jesus to them.
Okay. They believed he rose from the dead. Apologists like Lycona here love to use this particular point to suggest that just because they believed that he rose from the dead, that actually means that he rose from the dead. That's not exactly what he's doing here, but he may sneak that in somewhere here in a second. Let's see where he's going with this, though.
Okay, they honestly believe that he rose from the dead and had appeared to them. We find this in early sources, eyewitness sources, or those rooted in eyewitness testimony. So you've got Paul, And Paul talks about the apostles as well. So Paul claims to be an eyewitness. He knows the Jerusalem apostles like Peter, James, and John, and he's getting information from them. And he says the apostles are proclaiming the resurrection of Jesus.
What? No. This is all fucked up. First of all, there's no eyewitness testimony to Jesus actually rising from the dead. Paul is our only contemporary witness, and all he says is that he had visions of Jesus, not that he actually saw him. Paul also mentions all the other apostles, and they had visions because of the fact that that's what it meant to be an apostle. Paul never claims to be an eyewitness. He most likely had a hallucination brought on by a schizotypal personality disorder. He never denotes Peter, James, and John as being eyewitnesses of Jesus. He only ever identifies them as apostles, which is very different from disciple. And again, just because they believe something was true does not actually make it true.